They mentioned the dialogue system, and oh yeah, here's a weird thing. They mentioned that when you're talking to an NPC, you can still move around. So first of all, the game is not paused, so it doesn't look as creepy. First of all, you always like to start a conversation and you see in the background some dude on fire because he was on combat and something like that, or mid swing, or there's a guy in the background who's like super angry at you and is like, what's wrong with you? Um, so okay, that looks better. Just the way that the game is not paused and you can still move around. You can still do other stuff, and the NPCs is probably going to be doing other stuff while talking to you. So here's my question: if other NPCs talk to each other, like kind of in Oblivion where they go like in Imperial City and they start up conversations, it's bound to happen in Skyrim. They better fix the audio issues where it's too loud, because if somebody is talking to you, you need to be able, like they're talking about a quest. I don't want to be bothered by somebody else, because the whole advantage of pausing the game is that there's no other sound but the voice and maybe like the middle music and stuff like that. So if they do that, it's gonna be weird. I'm hoping they got the volume right. Another thing is that what happens like with the choices? Are there going to be more choices in? Are there going to be any choices at all? Like even if it's just yes or no in the dialogue? Because well, you're talking to a dude, and you can move around. So can you move around and you're stuck with just that activity, or you're just talking to the character and you can still move around and open doors and stuff like that, but you still have the choices, or the choices are going to appear when you're facing the character, or when you're touching the character, basically. So let's say you start a conversation and then you back off, the interface kind of disappears and the character is still talking. So you can kill some other dude, then come back, and say, and when you come back and you almost touch in like in close range, then the interface appears and you say yes. And then I'm thinking, well, what's the structure between conversation with multiple characters? Could you do that? And if so, how does that work with the interface? Because it has to be manageable somehow, and the computer has to make sense of it all, right? You have to make sense of it all. So I'm really curious on how they're going to pull that off. They haven't showed that yet. They haven't shown any of the way the skills work, like speechcraft. I'm really hoping that they got speechcraft right. I think I mentioned that in my first impressions of the teaser. I talked about like what I want them to improve upon, which was mostly the AI and how the NPCs interact with the player. And I think the way they do it, like what they've announced so far, as far as like the game still is not paused and stuff like that, I think it's an improvement. Apparently it's not going to be fixed, so they won't look as creepy. So there's an improvement there. Excuse me, but we'll see what gameplay wise what's going to happen. What else? No, I think I got the gist of it. If I forgot anything, I'll probably answer, like if you ask it, like if it's more specific. I'm trying to talk about like everything that was announced so far. Now let's go to the trailer. The trailer was nothing short of amazing, the way I see it. There's a few things though that was really interesting, and I'm going to point them out to you. And I'm going to try to see if we can't, not necessarily predict what the game's going to be like, but let's see what they have so far and what kind of information that we can pull out of the gameplay parts, because we've seen the trailer before, the teaser before, but I'm just going to like fast forward to the parts where it's just gameplay. And let's see. So we have this. So I'm just going to fast forward. Okay, blah, 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 blah. And then, there you go. So we see perspective of a dragon. Okay, that's cool. It's probably just cinematic stuff. But here's a return. Okay, now there's two things I want to talk about just with that shot or that scene. First of all, the guy's sprinting, and Bethesda already mentioned about sprinting. It's a game mechanic where you consume a lot of your stamina, yay, to well, to run faster, which will be a temporary thing. And the way that they shake the camera, I think, is going to be an interesting effect. So you'll move faster and it's going to wobble. Now, here's a question: will the stamina be like the consummation of the stamina be based on your encumbrance, or maybe your armor? If you're wearing heavy armor, you know, are you gonna not necessarily run slower, but will it drain you faster? That's my question. And the reason I went, yeah, with the stamina thing is because in Oblivion, stamina doesn't mean jack, other than the amount of output that you do with your damage and when you're going to be knocked out, and when somebody's doing hand-to-hand combat. Other than that, you could run as fast as you can, and you know, stamina is not doing anything. And it was one of those bars that didn't really merit being shown in the HUD display. But now, like, I think they're putting more focus into it, kind of like in Morrowind. Maybe not as much as Morrowind, but you know, the idea that you're sprinting and it consumes stamina, for me, that's just fantastic. I love that. Now, another thing I want to mention is this is a forest. Duh. But you know, it doesn't. It looks a lot better than what we have in Oblivion. But honestly, from like if I'm looking at it closely, there's only two things that changed, other than the fact that there's snow. The trees look a lot better, so they modeled them better. They're more detailed and stuff like that. But also, the lighting is a lot better. Forget the fact that the trees are casting shadows and stuff like that. And this is something that, as far as art goes, as far as not necessarily 3D art, but you know, 2D art, anything art related where there's an image. Because you know, music is art, but that doesn't apply. It doesn't matter what your subject matter is. You could be doing a painting of a nail clipper. What makes it good art most of the time, and which pretty much like a key element to making like something look really good, is lighting. And I think they pull it off nicely. I'll show more examples of the lighting, but I think the biggest difference between Skyrim and Oblivion is not necessarily they have more detail and blah blah blah. There's not even grass here. Of course, there's no grass when there's snow and stuff like that. But in Oblivion, you had like the bushes and stuff like that. So there's more detail in the typical Oblivion screenshot than this scene right here. There's probably some bushes in the Skyrim environment, no doubt about that, even in the winter part. But I'm thinking, like, you see the tree? It doesn't have any roots. It just goes cylinder, hit the ground, that's it. Kind of like in Oblivion. So it's the same thing. So the game is very similar, but it looks better. So mad props to the guy who, or people that improved the lighting engine. And I think the fact that it can do shadows adds up in even more. So that's one thing. So that's two things: the stamina thing when you're sprinting, and the visual effects. So it's not a huge leap in visual quality. It's a leap in visual quality, but it's not something that is affected by the how can I put this? Well, I already explained it. I thought maybe there was a way to simplify the meaning, but no. So yeah, probably the textures on the ground, like the way they blend, like from stone to grass or from dirt to grass, it looks probably better. It blends better or something like that. There's some example here. Maybe I can. Nah, you can't really tell from this shot. So, and then it shows more flying. They have birds. That's kind of cool. Hoping that's going to be in the game. Let's see the birds, not just hear him.
Time after Oblivion opened,
Oh yeah, more sprinting. There's nothing more to add to that shot. I mean, it's the same stuff. Like, there's a bush. It looks a lot better, you know? Yep to do. There it is. That's the shot I wanted. So you have third person. That's fine. That's for cinematic. And then you got this. And I'm thinking, are they doing like a Sonic the Hedgehog thing where when he runs and he stops suddenly, it does that? And if it does, I think that would be pretty cool. I don't know if it would be good in practice, but the concept, the idea that if you're sprinting, using all your stamina and then you stop, then you go even in first person. I think they have the animation for it. It would be cool. It just happens that in this shot he's at the edge of a cliff. Maybe they just animated that for this purpose of the cinematic, but I'm thinking if they can do that type of blending of animations, you can do anything. Like if you're running and you're turning a corner, like in the streets, maybe your camera is gonna like really shift. It might look awkward at first, but I think it's if they pull it off, similar to what the Dark Messiah of Might and Magic. I think I'm gonna mention that a few times, but if they do that, like camera shakes and stuff like that, controls are sometimes awkward in that game. But I think if they rework, it's a fairly old game. So for Skyrim, if they make it work, maybe it'll do well. So that's an idea, that's a thought. I'm not saying that it is going to be like that, but if it did, that would be kind of cool. We get an idea also that they know how to make hands now. They don't look ugly as sin. Just throwing that out there. We see some low-res textures here. That's fine. I'm never one to really care too much about the texture quality because I know when it's supposed to be the edge of a cliff, and I know that there's snow and there's rock underneath. I can tell that just for a few pixels. And basically your focus is on the trees and stuff like that, and there's water. So let's see what else can we find. Shadows, blah 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 blah. There's not much to say here, but I just love the way just the overall, like, look at this. I'm just gonna turn. It's a nice shot. Of course, his foot seems to be in the wrong spot. Let's see. There might be some clipping involved, but otherwise, it's looking good. I hope that's part of the dragon and not the shadows that are being like inverted, because that looks like an arm right here. Okay, it's a dragon. Confirmed. Yay. For a second there, I was going to mention I'm going to show it later, but I wanted to mention something about like the armor sets, like how they're going to work in the game. I think we have a good idea just from the trailer. Okay, that looks good. That looks good. The items look like they look detailed. Of course, they could add more detail, like they up the resolution, but can it really fit on a computer? This is good enough quality for me. I don't need more than that. And that just looks awesome. And come on. As epic, and it picks up the music too. So the trailer looks nice. That looks awesome. Waterfalls everywhere. I can just imagine like walking in there. It's awesome. Again, it's all lighting. Now I'm kind of curious. Can we see other animals in like deers? I don't know. Maybe have some bunny rabbits somewhere. That would add. I don't need to see bugs and stuff like that. Although that would be pretty cool. Birds. We saw some birds earlier. I want to see birds. I want to see more birds. Because birds, they add stuff to the sky. I just don't want to see just clouds. If you add birds, it gets stuff to look. We'll see dragons in the skies, so that adds something to it. But, if we can see some birds, if they add dragons, they can add birds. I want my birds. So yeah, but how about bunnies in there? Because we see like deers here, right? There's There's one there and there's another one there, and then that's pretty much all the wildlife that we see. Um, that's another example of lighting. They got like the windows to be, lit in the nighttime. So props to them. I mean, stuff that we could mod it like in Oblivion, but the fact that they're doing it now in their game, I think it shows that they're paying attention to not only the community but to their limitations, and they know that okay, we should have done that from the get-go, and let's put some effort into it. Why didn't we think of that? I'm pretty sure it was an oversight on their part when they made Oblivion. That's cool. You can see some NPCs in action. There's nothing much to talk about in this shot other than the fact that horses. They didn't say anything about mounted combat or even just mounts in general, but you know they're trying. They're experimenting with the idea, and I think just that alone kind of proves it. The fact that they have horses and it has a saddle and stuff like that. So they added mounts into the game, but will it be in the final build? Who knows? That NPC in particular, there's nothing special about her, but other than the fact that with the camera angle and the way that the camera moves and the way that she walks, it reminds me a lot of the Imperial Guard in the intro cinematic of Oblivion. Just the giant guard in the city in the intro cinematic. I don't know. It's like I have the freaking time bar there, but and does she slide too? Anyways, they're kind of too far to tell. I'm gonna try to zoom in. Oh no! Wait. Okay, if I can just remove this guy, I think we can see some ears. Maybe. Are you an elf? Maybe. I mean, I know it's the land of the Nords, but it's probably it's underneath this action bar here. Oh well. I like the shot here. Very Skyrim, not Skyrim, Skingrad looking in terms of design. I'm pretty sure that has nothing to do with it, but I like I make a connection between that and Skingrad because there's a castle on top of whatever. A lot of people were not angry, but they complained about the water and how it looks. And yes, I had the same reaction. I had a very similar reaction where it looked weird. Like I was kind of, whoa, what's this? But I look at it now, and they could do better. But do I need that? There's going to be a mod that's going to fix it anyways. So who cares about the water? Let's get the gameplay working. And I'm sure that it's, the art team has nothing to do with the design team. The art team's going to say, oh, you can't put that in because we can't do it in art. No, it's not. That never happens. But I think it has still like the look of water to it. I think it's just the shape of it, like the way it does. Like there's one bump here, one bump here, one bump here. It seems very calculated, so I think the artist just kind of did shapes and it moves. But if they had, I don't know, more dynamic feel to it, like the way it was shaped, maybe it would look better. And I think there is some depth of field here because that looks blurry as hell. So depth of field. What else is there? No fish. I see that guy again. Pretty sure he was an elf. Still can't tell. You son of a. Again, it's just lighting. Nothing too special out of Oblivion, like say, for example, other than the fact that the NPCs, they kind of look more natural now. The way they walk, the way they sneak around. A lot slower too. Did you see that? Shouldn't do. And that's another thing I want to talk about: stealth. How is that going to work with the interface? Is the eye going to pop up the moment you go in stealth, or is it? Are you only going to rely on your senses in this fact that you need to know when you're being detected, when you're being spotted? And of course, they do that in Oblivion, but you know how the deer or whatever that animal is, like the head kind of just goes up. Um, is that are they going to do that subtlety like in their animation? Say that's how you're being spotted when people turn around and they shout at you. You're like, oh my god, you know. I think I think they tried maybe to do something similar in Oblivion, but maybe they pulled it off this time. Maybe you don't need the magical eye. Um, I would hope so, because I think it would add to the immersion to the game. But maybe it's just gonna, when you press control or whatever the key is to stealth, it's just gonna pretty much like it did in Oblivion and Morrowind. Like it's just an icon that's gonna, you're in stealth. Um, so, but what else can we see in this shot? Well, we already seen like three different kind of variations of forests. We've seen greens, we've seen like snowy, and we've seen, well, this, and very colorful. So we have variation in, and I think even more variation than we had in Oblivion. And I thought Oblivion had good, subtle variations into their environment, but this is, as clear as day. You have, where's the other one? Probably too far back. We got this, and we got the snowy this. So different kind of lighting too, and very different types of. They look like tile sets, like in, uh, like let's say a Warcraft or a Starcraft game and stuff like that. And I want to point it out that is that thing part of the armor or is it part of the quiver? Because if it's part of the quiver, is it going to show up if you wear like heavier armor? I'm thinking like this is more part of the armor, and it's just coincidence that they have a quiver on that guy. And the armor design is also, and I'm gonna zoom in here. Well, I could zoom in right now. I was gonna talk about the armor designs, and I was gonna say, well, it's all pretty much all in one piece. Maybe they can have like another piece where you can put a shirt underneath it, but the way that I look at the model, this is one. It looks like one piece. Um, so it's going to be more like Fallout 3, where we're going to have maybe more designs than you had like in Oblivion, but it's still just going to be like a shirt. Here you have like, okay, you have elbow pads, but it looks more like one of those Raiders armor sets that you had in Fallout 3. So the way I see it, at the very least, it's just going to be like one suit at the most. Probably just going to be like hands, chest, pants, boots, hat. I know like a lot of people were expecting more or they wanted more, but the way I see it is that they're not going to bother. See-handed swords, that's cool. Troll looks cool. Looks a lot better than those. There's a bird. The bird. They look a lot more menacing than they were scary in Oblivion. I think the first time I saw that, screaming was not involved, but still I was taking, push back, and the fact that they regenerate pretty quickly and they charge and their animation is aggressive, and this is a lot even, like I'm kind of worried to meet one of those things in game now. This is awesome. Is there anything I can talk about in stealth other than the fact that these guys are just watching her die? I think it's pretty funny. There's no way you can hide from sight with the fire like that. No matter how many shadows you have, there's a guy here. You hear it, whatever. And this guy, whatever instrument that is, it looks like a guitar, but I'm pretty sure it isn't. But we see like there's a lot of items. I'm pretty sure you can pick all of that up, and that looked like stuff that you would see like in Morrowind actually, like those type of jars. Um, stuff that you just spot. And is that a Dunmare? Can't tell. Like a dark hand. But this is an elf, so this is a high elf, and that's how she looks like. At first, the first time I saw the trailer, I thought she was bugged in the sense that her hands were not touching her legs like a normal person would sit. But she has something in her hands, so it seems so. I don't know what that is all about, but you can tell again that the armor set's just gonna be like one piece. Maybe have like a shirt underneath, but that's as much as you're gonna get. She looks kind of weird actually. She looks like how the vampires look in Oblivion, like very um, not small frame, but it's small, I guess, like skin tight. She doesn't have any, like her cheekbones are pronounced, and she doesn't have that much of a cheek really, just a cheekbone. Um, so I don't know. Maybe they're trying to distinct the classes, or not the classes, the races even more visually, and I'm hoping in gameplay also. So you know that's going to be interesting. That looks either like a Nord or maybe a an Imperial, and it's probably going to be bred in with my luck. But anyways, it looks like with the jawline. I would say more of a Nord. Then again, he doesn't look that much bigger than a high elf, so that's why I'm thinking maybe Imperial. And never mind the fact that he's wielding that, but you know the armor sets again. It's just one piece, pants and boots. Now about whatever then, let's call it a guitar, a lute maybe. Are we gonna hear people playing their music? Because in Morrowind you had instruments. Um, didn't have that in Oblivion, but are we gonna walk into an inn and have talent show basically? That would be kind of cool to see. Let's see what else we can find. I other than the fact that the guy's backstabbing. Well, it's not even backstab. It's just slitting in the person's throat. Uh, that looks good. Um, let's see if we can't get like a better shot of the. There you go. Dungeon design looks very similar to that of Oblivion. I love the fact that the eyes is streaking like that. They have a nice effect for the not necessarily the undead, but you can see like it goes through. So it's a very simple way of doing the effect. So yeah, it's to be expected, right? What kind of item is that? Is that an axe? Maybe like a Dwemer axe? I don't know. It looks very like massive, bulky. And is he holding it right? That doesn't look right to me. I see fingers here. I'm hoping those are fingers. Still a lot of tweaking to do. But, nonetheless, this looks good. But yeah, they remind me of the ruins. Like the towers that you would find across Cyrodiil. So, very similar architecture. So that's fine. Undead looks cool. I love undead. There's a guy with the shield again. With the blood and stuff like that. That's fine. This. Okay. We have one-handed staves, maybe, or wands, and we have like the sword. So again, it's all Gandalf style. But I also want to point out there's water in the cave, and there's an entrance or exit. So I'm thinking it could be multiple things, but I'm suggesting that they fixed the problem that most RPGs had of that scale, where you had to open a door and you load. Those caves always were like in Oblivion. All the caves had like a wooden door that would block it. Why is that? Um, And even in Daggerfall, it was like one item, like one picture of like a door, and it was out of a cave. So are they doing everything streamed? That would be awesome. Like I could understand like opening doors like for houses. They would load a new cell because they're called cells in this game. Excuse me, in engine talk, anyways. But if you could stream like outside overworld to, let's say, go inside a dungeon like a cave, that would be amazing. Less loading screens, more game. That would also mean that the NPCs, like the enemies, would follow you out correctly. Because they can sort of bug out in Oblivion, and in Morrowind they didn't even bother to follow you outside, so you can abuse it basically. But I always hated the fact that with loading screens and stuff like that, if you exited out, chances are the enemies in most games they would just wait right at the entrance, so you couldn't go back in. Because if you did, you knew that you were going to be surrounded and blocked. But the fact that you remove the door and it opens up the possibility that you can maybe avoid them or kill them from an even further distance and stuff like that. So you have leeway here. But I really like the way that there's water here. I don't think it does make sense to have this and this current, but maybe yeah, they both head out. So I'm more inclined to think that this is outside and it's just one stream without loading. Well, there is loading obviously in streaming, but it's dynamic. It's not. Here's a loading screen. Read the useful tip that you read like thousands of times already. So motion blur and the camera is still there. In Oblivion when you get hit, and it's like so. Can we tell what guy that is? Nope. Still nothing. I'm still more inclined to think it's just going to be one piece of armor. Oh well. That looks maybe like a camp. Looks like a... yeah. That's very low res, so maybe there's LOD, like level details into their structures and stuff like that. That would be kind of cool. I like that. I'm a sucker for, optimization and stuff like that. That looks cool. That looks amazing. I think, oh no, I was gonna say it kind of reminds me of like a high elf, but he's got a hood. This is a really good animation here. Now, what I like what I want to comment on this shot, not so much at how it looks in terms of lighting and stuff like that, but look at the way the enemies move, especially that dude or dudette zombies. They're kind of like ganging up on that guy, but they're not. There's only one guy that's kind of not even. It's kind of like the Star Trek feel to it, where or tribal Mortal Kombat. Everybody's waiting for you to make the mistake, a mistake, and then they're all gonna strike, or maybe they go like one at a time and stuff like that. But this guy kind of goes. He slides, but he does a little slide here, but he kind of shifts. So maybe pathfinding, you can't go over here, or maybe it's just his attitude where they surround you and they want to make you feel like you're being surrounded. So the NPCs, even if they charge from the same direction, maybe they'll spread out and surround you, kind of like Zerglings do in StarCraft 2. Maybe they have that in the game. So that would be kind of cool to see in the first perspective. Because right now we all see in third, and if you play a game, it wouldn't look like that. You would go from either over the shoulder or in first person. But if you can get the feeling that you're surrounded and the characters, they keep shifting, like how many are they? You're confused. If they do that, I think it would go nicely. So that'd be kind of cool. What else is there? More dragon stuff. Armor sets looks cool. Kind of reminds me of the Dwemer armor sets, like a darker set. But I'm no expert in Elder Scrolls Armory. Over here, you get a good example of, well, maybe not a good example, but get an idea of how the pathfinding is going to work in Skyrim. Because I'm thinking in Oblivion, the NPCs didn't charge you straight. They kind of just did that to avoid being hit by arrows and stuff like that. Didn't always work, but anyways, they kind of just, they had that randomness to their pathing, and I think that's what that thing is doing. I think the AI, like for it seems very similar to the wolves that you would find like in Oblivion. Like load the game up, find a wolf, try to go around like a small hill and watch it go. And I think this is very similar. Again, that looks amazing, man. That I was really surprised. It looks like contextual animation where it's not even a backstab at that point. You're just kind of okay. It starts from hand to hand, so maybe the guy's like grabbing you and stuff like that, and then you can still strike, and it does that move. Because initially I was wondering, like, how do you pull that off? Like, how does in gameplay terms, how do you move up to the guy and do this type of animation? But I think I answered my own question just by looking at it right now. Is that you start face to face, and kind of like in any confrontation in the Elder Scrolls, but then because I have a dagger, and because he's maybe like barehanded, doing a hand-to-hand combat, maybe it triggers that type of animation. Or maybe it's just like critical deaths, and suddenly the character just shifts in front of you, and then you kill him. I don't know. First time I saw this, I thought maybe it would be a Nirnroot, but I don't think it is. It looks good. Same dragon thing again. The guy is awesome, but I've watched him so many times that it's the same dude, so there's not much to comment on. This reminds me of the sewers system and more stealthing. So spiders, Lord of the Rings, everyone. Let's see. The dragon doesn't look too scripted. Well, I mean, it's scripted for the cinematic, but just look at the way it turns. It feels like there's a path, so dragons will be able to, kind of like the NPCs on the ground, they'll move kind of unnaturally, like they'll go forward and then they'll turn and then they'll turn. So it'll be very robotic. I mean, I'm sure the animators are trying to make it as fluid as possible, but can you really do that? So they're doing the best they can, and I think they're doing a good job, even though I can spot these things, little mistakes. But I mean, the idea that the dragons are the fully animated, like with the Radiant AI type of technology, the way that they swoop down, I can believe that. It seems very convincing. Reasonable, like realistic to do, as in it's not like so far-fetched that, kind of like what Peter Molyneux would say about the Fable series. Oh yeah, it's got this, it's going to be the best thing, and you'll be able to do this and that and not deliver. I think they can easily deliver on the dragons, convincing dragons, and I think, because you don't want to take the trailer as being verbatim on what the game is going to look like, because you have to take stuff, especially in trailers, as at face value. You're going to say, it's tailored to make it look awesome, but the way I see the dragons, the way I see it move, I think, yeah, concerning that they can do NPCs and they can do their pathfinding, dragons could probably swoop down and stuff like that for AI's sake. So none of the dragons, I don't think they'll be scripted into the game, like the dynamic dungeons, those that are going to attack the towns and stuff like that. So awesome. Still, collision here, you see, I was kind of underwhelmed by it, but still has a nice connection. But terrain, it looks like, at that point for me, I saw the polygons, in the sense that if a dragon collided with the ground, I think it would not necessarily make a dent, but I don't know, squish. But the model doesn't squish and stuff like that. And I'm not critiquing the game at that point, at that level of detail, but I noticed that they obviously maybe handcrafted the animations to do this, so dragons will not necessarily fall all the time the same way, but there is a logic behind it. So I think it's very reasonable for them to be able to pull that off. Um, and not expect the game to be like the most realistic, the most awesome sauce game ever. It's probably going to be like a very good game, but I mean, down to earth, trying to pull it down to what it's going to be like. Because they impressed us with the E3 demo of Oblivion way back with like the Radiant AI, and we got kind of tricked. I mean, the AI could do that, not with the way that the AI was released, but here I think it's reasonable, and I think it's not asking too much of the game. And that's weird. Why is there a white? Looks like it's been masked actually. Like that's a like photoshopped effect, not a photoshopped effect, but it's been composited. Those rocks were added later, it seems. Like that rock, and that rock. Maybe this one too. That one too. Or maybe the lighting is really weird. I don't know. It looks more like tacked on, and they kind of had a mistake on the alpha channel, which is offset. Everything else, that looks awesome. And see, that's convincing enough for an animation, but also I'm thinking maybe, and this is just speculation, maybe they for each prop that they do for like exteriors, like buildings and stuff like that, they coded in like, like in NPCs for towns in Oblivion, they say like this is a door, NPCs can go through the door. The NPCs identify that object as being a door. So I'm thinking maybe they did that for dragons where you can perch here, you can perch here, and the dragons will say, oh, I need to perch now, and then it'll look, okay, I can perch here, and then it'll fly down, a very robotic, I'll fly down and then turn and then fly there, stop, and then, so I think again it's reasonable. It's not asking too much. Now, did I miss anything? Most likely. Did I forget to mention something and talk about? Most likely. But then again, you know what? I've been talking for how long? An hour and a half. Uh, there's more to talk about, obviously, but I can't think of anything. I think I've covered all the bases of what I wanted to talk about. I think Down to Earth, the game's going to be very solid. I think it's going to be not only the best Elder Scrolls yet, but I think, quite honestly, I've never been impressed with a series of video games in a long time as much as the Elder Scrolls. And Dragon Age 2 hasn't, I don't think it came out just yet, but the demo came out, and it was a decent game. It looked promising, but there were some things that I didn't agree upon, and to me, it doesn't feel like oh my god, I have to buy it. I know some people will disagree and they will buy it. Maybe some gamers are faster than me, so they'll buy Dragon Age 2, and they'll finish it before they get Skyrim, and they'll get their adventure and they'll get their money's worth. No doubt about that, but. Considering all the RPGs that are coming out this year and all the games that are coming out this year, I think that beats the cake. I don't think there's any game, even those that are coming up, not necessarily this year, but the next year. And the next year, like Diablo 3 is going to be hard pressed. If they do another, like a Rockstar does another. Red Dead Redemption, or even like a GTA, Grand Theft Auto. Like, no, I think this Elder Scrolls is gonna last a long time. Just because visually it's pleasant, from what we've seen at least. And I mean, all the Elder Scrolls last a good amount of time, but I'm thinking like with the Elders, like with Oblivion, I think it won't age as well uh, from a gameplay mechanic and from a visual standpoint. This looks like one of those games that will last a long time, at least from a visual standpoint, because the gameplay mechanics it sounds good in our heads, but in practice it has to look good, and the only way we can do that is to play the game. But I got a good vibe out of this, and I'm trying to be as underhyped as possible. Like I'm extremely excited. I've been waiting for this for a long time, but at the same time, I look at it and I can step back and say, yeah, it's a good game. You know, despite the fact that maybe the armors are one piece, despite the fact that you know the pathing of the AI, like the wolf and some of the skeletons, the sliding and stuff like that. That's reasonable to expect out of a video game, even by today's standards. So it looks solid. It looks they've improved on at least two elements. They're trying to remove the whole class architecture or archetype. They fixed their characters. They look a lot nicer now. They don't look like ass, and the animation looks a lot better. The two main things that I hate, well, the characters and the animation, the way they move, was one of the major problems I had with the Elder Scrolls. I've even claimed that these guys didn't have any good character artists because of that. Because any other game could do better, but now they show to us that they can do that. I mean, they probably hired some people to do that since then, but it looks good. And also, initially, like I wanted the improvements on the AI and stuff like that, like the interaction with the NPCs. And I'm thinking, from what they've told us, they're working on that. So I'm thinking I won't be disappointed at all, one bit. I think I'll be pleasantly surprised, even like something I won't expect, and it'll make me smile and stuff like that. So I'm still curious on the whole interface, though. How are they going to pull it off? How is the PC version going to make it work and not piss off a lot of fans and like Oblivion did and stuff like that? And even in Morrowind, like I don't like the UI in Morrowind that well. Like I understand like there's windows and stuff like that, but no, icons, don't like that. But yeah, I think that's as much as I can talk about for now. Like again, over an hour and a half, and I can't think of anything else. I'm sure I missed something, but I think I'll go like if you guys ask the questions, uh, I'll be able to answer like on a you know one-to-one basis. I guess ask me a question, I might answer it in like the comments below. And again, I'm sharing my thoughts to you guys mainly, well, because a lot of people ask for it, but also because I want to read your comments on what you think. Like, do you think I'm being reasonable? Do you think did I forget anything, like news-wise or gameplay-wise? Like, can you guys answer some of the questions? Maybe they release information that I didn't get. Share your thoughts as well, and maybe that'll help us deal with the waiting until November 11th. So yeah, I think that's it for now. So until next time.